Harris Green Lee Rea III. Some of us called him Lee. Some of us called him Big Lee. Some of us called him Uncle Lee, Uncle Harris. Many of you and me called him Harris. I met him when I was 12. He was 17 years older than me. And he was a tall glass of water. I must confess, won me over almost immediately. He gave me power tools. What more could a 12-year-old want? He had power tools, a project, some wood, some metal, and I was off. He liked to say that I was either his youngest brother or his oldest son. He definitely was more than a brother to me. He really was almost an adopted dad. I mean that I adopted him. See, I was 12, we were kind of homebodies. My sister Sharani would take us out sometimes, or really me out with some of my families. I remember the one time that we saw the same Shaggy Dog movie 4 times in a row, just because we turned it into a party. But Lee changed it. He married my sister, but he embraced my family. He loved my sister, and he loved my family. We went on family dinners, we went on family movie nights. I'd never been to a movie with my dad before or since. Most of all, I adopted Lee when my father died. It was about a year later. He disappeared on a trip. And my mom and I moved in with Sharani and Lee. And he took the role of male figure in my life. He was a great big brother. He gave me his comic book collection, still have it. He gave me his BB gun, told me how to shoot it. He anointed me into the brotherhood of vinyl. He taught me how to properly hold a record, how to properly care for a needle. It's a ceremony that I've taught my own son recently. Something that I passed on to make sure that we are not part of the unwashed. He loved family, especially his brothers, especially his mom, his dad, his brothers, and his sisters. I think he had a special place in his heart for Martha and Gwen, since they were the closest in age to him. Although I don't think that they appreciated professional wrestling as much as he did. Am I right?
You're right about that.
We loved to put them into headlocks. That was the only way they could get out was to say uncle. I swear the day that I wrote this, I went home and my son tried to put me into a headlock. I didn't say uncle. Lee loved being a family member. He really did love my sister for years. They started Peaches together. And my sister and their children still run it today. He hired my mom. She had no experience, very little idea about bookkeeping. She learned quickly, and she did well. She really worked well with Lee. Recently, Lee talked about what a gift it was to work with my mother. Whenever he needed financial help or decisions, he was trying to figure out what to do, how to spend the money, how to save it. He said he talked to my mom, and he valued the insights. She always gave him good advice. And my mom mentioned that he was always a gentleman to her. He insisted that all those 20-year-old goofball employees at the record store, he insisted they call her Mrs. Percy. All right. No one was allowed to call her Hilda. No one was allowed to even call her Mrs. Hilda or Ms. Hilda, which is so common in New Orleans. No, it was Mrs. Percy, and he treated her with respect. That kind of respect was a huge influence on me. And that's one of the reasons I love Lee. A child judges a man by how you treat his mother, his parents. A parent judges a man by how he treats your children. Lee adored my son. He called him Little Mac. He treated him like his own son. I remember one day when BJ was about 1.5 years, and he grabbed my boy, took me along, grabbed a flashlight. We went hunting for the dark in the garage. They said, "We're gonna go see the dark. Let's go. Let's see it, Little Mac." He was so loving to BJ. Just today I found a picture of him holding my son, probably 2. And they were looking at airplanes. We were waiting for a flight in the airport outside of, the Popeyes at the airport, outside of the Southwest terminal. Now don't get me wrong, Lee was one cantankerous cuss. He really was. God save you if you woke him up in the middle of the night, all right? I love to wake him up in the middle of the night, just to watch him just lose it. He would just lose it. And you remember so much grumbling. I remember so many of you would have heard him grumbling about getting wrong kind of mustard or something at the grocery store, putting the mustard in the wrong spot. He had his ways, and he was stubborn. He loved those simple things in life, like the mustard. On Saturday, he'd have mustard on his hot dog, always yellow mustard. At least that was one I remembered. I don't know if he changed it, but I doubt it. He loved going to the beach. He loved stopping at the beach or on the way to the beach to get Krispy Kremes. Well before Krispy Kremes became a national franchise, it was like going on a pilgrimage, going to a Krispy Kreme, getting it hot, getting the jelly-filled donuts. We would always get several dozen. Not sure if we would eat all of them, but we would eat more than we should have. He loved Friday night movie nights. As a teenager, I really did not want to spend my Friday nights with my family. I did not want to do that. There was so much more going on. But Lee firmly and lovingly insisted. And there's at least a few of you here who went with us on one of those Friday night events because he was happy to pay for anybody I knew to attend. More the merrier. He loved movies. He loved talking about movies. He loved going. We had the oddest little tradition. We go to Wendy's, and Wendy's was a pretty new franchise at that point. We go to Wendy's, we get a burger. He was excited about the chili. And then we go see a movie. I remember still going to, just feeling like I was dragged to a movie. I just had no idea why I was there. It was Friday. I had so many better things to do. And all of a sudden I'm watching a big boulder rolling down a cave and a guy running into a plane. And I thought, this is a pretty good movie, this Indiana Jones movie. He was a good guy. I think that stability is really valuable to me. I think that made a huge difference to me. I believe that any of my successes in life has some foundation in the stability that Lee gave me, the traditions he gave me. Many of you are here because of Lee's passion for Louisiana music. He loved music. He loved every bit of music. He talked about the Kinks when I first met him. He just loved it. Everybody would love the Beatles, everybody could love the Rolling Stones, but the Kinks, that was something that made you different. But darn, he loved everything about Louisiana. I mean, he loved Louisiana. When he was a country boy at heart, he grew up in the Carolinas. He grew up in Charlotte. But he moved to the big city, but you never really could take the country out of the boy. And the state spoke to him. He loved every kind of Louisiana music. He loved Jazz Fest. I remember going to Jazz Fest, just soaking wet with a plastic bag over our heads, or over our whole body, losing our shoes in the mud. He loved the crafts. He loved the history. He loved the culture. We'd go to some of those little cultural speeches. Nobody goes to the cultural talks during Jazz Fest. Nobody does that. We were there. He loved to take road trips through the state. Really, he would read about some roadside attraction or some country restaurant. Some of you may have gone to the dinner bell with us in the middle of, at the edge of Mississippi. He loved Cajun sausage. He'd go to random stands or random grocery stores or gas stations well before people did Boudin trails. Carmen tells me a story that recently they had driven and gone. He convinced her to drive through some of the back roads of Kentucky, the perilous roads. I'm not sure if it was just because, or I'm betting it was just because he knew that there was a 2-car ferry that would cross the Kentucky River, one of the only ferries that crossed a river. And it only took 2 cars, and it was dangerous to get there, but he wanted to do it, so they did it. That's the kind of guy he was. No kind of discussion about Lee would be appropriate unless we talked about food. Usually Cajun food. God, did he love to cook. He loved to eat. He didn't like to eat anything healthy. Not really. His broccoli or gratin had a base of at least 1 to 2 cups of mayonnaise. His jambalaya had no water in it. That rice was never cooked by water. That rice was cooked by the bacon fat and the sausage and the ham and every kind of meat that you can think of. My God, that was a good jambalaya. If you haven't had a jambalaya, you have never had real jambalaya. After Katrina, he dealt with the stress by feeding the family. I mean, there were people who were at each other's throats, metaphysically. And I remember at least one time he just pulled me aside and he said, "Let's go make some jambalaya. I don't know what's going on over there. Let's just make some jambalaya." So we went into the kitchen and we cooked. One of the greatest joys that I have is remembering how we talk about his kids, how proud he was of his kids, how much he loved his kids. And as he was dying, he did anything to go be with his kids, and he loved them so much. He loved my sister. He loved my mom. One of the joys that I have is seeing him talk to my mom when she was going through her own aches and pains, and he was going through chemo. When my mom fell down once, and Lee was the one who went and helped her out. It's been a joy to watch him work with Tammy, his niece. She cared for him in a way that I can't imagine. She nursed his body, she lifted his spirits. And they really both brought the best of each other out. I think they both, they spoke so highly of each other. And those were the last days of his life. And to see her take care of him and him talk about how wonderful she was, that was unbelievable. He loved his sister Martha. He donated bone marrow. He did everything she could. Who taunted him as he was dying that she had a jelly donut and he could get it if he would get over there to the beach. His final thing that he said, I think, was a laugh at that joke. I loved watching him watch sports. He loved sports. He'd do anything. As he's dying from cancer, he would stop and watch the Duke game. I remember, I think it was in January when I was there, and he had decided on a Friday that he wasn't going to get all of the blood that he needed. He was going to try to see if he could get away with a little less and get out of there faster. And he always liked to do that. So he ran out of gas sometime, and Sunday just crashed, and we had to take him over to get a transfusion. He spent all day there. And as I mentioned, he was a cantankerous cuss. He was not so pleased when we got there at 2 a.m. And Tammy was trying to cheer him up, and I just looked at him and said, you know, I was just telling Tammy about that time, probably like 75, that you and my sister were in an apartment, and the neighbors called to find out if my sister was getting beat up because Lee was screaming so loudly and swinging a bat around, and they could tell, and they thought that that was a really bad sign. And I told him that, since it was in January, right after he had spent all day getting blood, and his face just lit up. And he said, that was the last day of the World Series, and Reggie Jackson hit 3 home runs that day. And the last one, he just pointed. No, I take that back, he didn't point. He just looked. He just looked, and you knew that he was going to hit that 3rd home run. And there was Lee, he was back. He was back, and he was alive, and he was so alive for the next few hours. And really, I stayed the rest of the week and had a ball talking to him. In a way, it was sort of a gift that he tanked out and he crashed, because I was only going to be there for 1 day. Instead, I got to spend the whole week with him. Most recently, I've had the joy of talking to Carmen, his wife, about how much joy she shared with him, about the road trips they took, about their beautiful, magical 9 years. Most of those years he was dying. Most of those years he could barely walk. He was a mess for most of those years, but he had throat cancer at first, and then leukemia, and she was there. But they also had road trips like that Kentucky ferry. They went to visit family in Charlotte. She brought them peace and joy. They loved to talk about business ideas. They both knew each other because of their interest in Louisiana. Business and economics. They talked about love, they talked about life, they talked about scripture, talked about music. The world was a better place because of my beloved Lee, because of Uncle Lee, because of Big Lee, because of Uncle Harris, because of Harris. My friend, enjoy your rest. We all miss you.